Up here on Cage Rider, we close out an exciting 2010 in MMA, and we're looking forward to an even better 2011. There should be more fight cards. There's more fighter depth than ever. Kevin Iole is here with us to tell us about his dream fights, the fights he'd like to see next year. Let's start right off the bat as we talk about a fight that was supposed to come down here in just a couple of days, and that was Jose Aldo against a young contender in Grisby. How quickly can we get them back in the cage for one of the big fights of the year?
Well, I really like Josh Grisby. Just a good all-around fighter, a guy that maybe hasn't gotten enough exposure because he's had some injuries, been out for a while. But I think, there's not a lot of guys in the world that you can say can give Jose Aldo a fight, let alone beat him. I think Josh Grisby is one of those guys. I'm not going to go out on a limb and predict him to beat Jose Aldo because Jose Aldo is a special talent. But I think Grisby's a guy that can really bring out the best in Aldo, and if Aldo is not at his best, win the fight. I think it'll be a heck of a fight. Grisby is fighting in the UFC debut coming up here on January 1st. Aldo's still injured, so I think that's a first quarter fight. Maybe early second quarter that we can see that. But we first got to get Jose Aldo healthy, and right now we don't have an idea when he might be healthy.
And when he does come back, we will call him Jose.
Jose now.
We have to transfer it over to Jose, so we apologize to Jose.
It's still 2010, so he's going to be Jose Aldo until the calendar turns, but Jose will remember you in 2011.
Another guy we should mention who I thought had a great 2010, I just don't know that the quality of opponents, got him the accolades he should have gotten. I hope his opponent level goes a little higher. That's Nick Diaz. Who would you like to see Nick Diaz fight?
I like Nick Diaz a lot. I think he's one of those guys that really brings it every time, and no matter who he fights, you're going to see a good fight because Nick Diaz is going to fight. He's going to throw a lot of punches. He's got a good ground game, although recently he hasn't been using that. Nick Diaz in and of himself makes everything a good fight. He's got an interesting fight coming up on Strikeforce against Cyborg Santos. I think that's going to be a really good, entertaining fight. I think the style of those fighters is good, but the fight I think that would be a fascinating fight for 2011. So assuming that this next fighter I'm going to talk about gets a little bit more experience, 1 win, maybe 2 wins, I think a good fight somewhere around the middle of the year for Nick Diaz will be against Tyron Woodley, a college wrestling star who has just a really terrific all-around game and has impressed me tremendously. He's getting better and better and better, and I think he would be the kind of guy that might have the style to give Nick Diaz some trouble if he gets the experience. Nick Diaz would have to be favored because Nick is one of the best fighters in the world. He's got a great overall game, but Tyron Woodley's got that great wrestling base and is developing the other aspects of his game. I think he's got terrific overall talent, and to me, mid-2011, I think that's going to be a fight that we should be looking for.
So Woodley and Diaz are both under contract with Strikeforce. I think the other cool thing about Strikeforce, the potential, when it merged with or got the deal with Showtime, was the ability to go out and matchmake with different promotions, and that hasn't really come together as much as we've wanted. We saw Melendez against Aoki. That turned out to be a decent fight. I think the fight we'd like to see get done is between Bellator, if that's who's going to be handling Eddie Alvarez, and Melendez, right? I mean, those are the two of the best 155s outside of UFC, so let's get the fight done.
I think there are two athletic, entertaining fighters, and I wrote a column about it before. I know Eddie wants to fight. I know Gilbert wants to fight. I know Bellator wants to fight. Scott Coker has been a little bit, maybe on the fence on that one. Scott's been a guy that, has been one to work with other promoters, and I'm not sure kind of what the what the tie-up here is, but hopefully they get that fight done because I think that's one of those fights. There's an argument that Melendez and Alvarez are in the top 3 at lightweight. Some people say number 1. I personally think you beat BJ Penn 2 times, you're the number 1 lightweight in the world. So right now, as we sit today, to me, Frankie Edgar is the number 1 lightweight in the world. But that fight might be for number 2. Hey, let's get it on.
We could make a list of, 5 to 7 fights alone at 135. The division is so stacked with good matchups. The matchup I've been pounding, and I don't think it's going to happen because I think for the reality show they're going to go Torres and Faber, but I want to see the heat and I want to see the matchup stylistically between Dominic Cruz and Faber.
is there a more improved fighter over the last 18 months in the world than Dominic Cruz? I don't think so, Steve. I'll tell you. Dominic Cruz just gets better every time out. And I remember selling him short before thinking, oh, he's got holes in his game. He's got this, he's got that. Every time you think you see a hole, the next time out, he closes it up. Really, he's a fast fighter. He's elusive. I mean, a fantastic fighter. Rightly in most people's top 10. Against Uriah Faber, kind of the old standby in the WEC days, now moving into the UFC. I think that would be a terrific fight. Uriah Faber is such a good fighter, such an entertaining fighter. Again, he's one of those guys that he brings it, so no matter who he fights, hey, I want to see him fight Torres. That's a fight that I've wanted to see for years. But I think the animosity that exists between Dominic Cruz, whose only loss was to Uriah Faber in 2007, I think that would just be fantastic, and that would really make it an interesting, an interesting fight, and hopefully it happens sometime in 2011.
So a lot of this future matchmaking also revolves around, guys who we're excited to see. And I think John Jones has been a guy that UFC has taken slowly, but, build. He's got a big fight coming up. If he gets by that fight, do we finally get to see John Jones go against one of the gigantic names at light heavyweight?
Yeah, John Jones is, to me, maybe the best prospect there is that's not a champion, that hasn't fought for a title. I think he's a terrific young talent. And, a while back on Twitter, I put him in my top 10 pound for pound, and a lot of people questioned, and I answered him being in my top 10 this way, saying I think of him as like Tiger Woods in 1997 or 1996, that elite special talent. 5-10 years from now, we're going to be talking to John Jones as just really, an icon of the sport, and he's on his way up. And I think it was fair in 1996 or 1997 to say Tiger Woods was one of the top 5 or top 10 golfers in the world, and he went on to prove that. And I think the same is going to be true in the future of John Jones. He hasn't proved it in the cage yet. He's beaten the guys he's faced, but he hasn't fought that level of competition that you can say he's truly at the top level. Well, if he gets past Ryan Bader, and of course he has to do that at UFC 126, that's going to be a tough challenge for him. But if he gets past Ryan Bader, and I think he will, then I think we'll see him against one of the top 10 fighters in the world, one of the top 5 fighters in the world. And my pick for that guy would be Rampage Jackson. Can you imagine Rampage firing those big right hands at John Jones and all the moves that John Jones has? I think that would be a fascinating fight. And so I hope we get a chance to see that. You're asking what I want to see in 2011. That would be a big one. We
know we have a loyal readership at Yahoo, and oftentimes there's this whole conspiratorial thing going. And you notice we've mentioned a lot of Strikeforce matchups, and I don't think people realize that in the pound-for-pound poll, there's one guy who actually is the biggest Fedor fanboy, and that's me. So I am looking forward to it. It's starting to get frustrating, though. I'm looking forward to him getting back in the cage in 2011, and the fight that has to be made, Kevin, and will it be made, is against Overeem.
That, with Fedor and any big fight, that's always the question. And not because of Fedor, but because of his management. I mean, his management, I think, is terrible. And they've just blown big fight after big fight. He would have fought Brock Lesnar at Cowboy Stadium in the UFC had he signed a UFC contract in 2009 when he was a free agent. Chose not to do that. That would have been a mega fight, multiple millions of dollars, and it would have brought so much attention to the sport of MMA. Fedor's management tries to talk about they don't care so much about money, and Fedor doesn't care about money, but think of what that fight would have done for MMA. Well, now, he's negotiating for another fight with Strikeforce. He's not going to fight in January, it looks like. But yeah, Alistair Overeem is the Strikeforce champion. I think Fedor needs to take that fight. That's a fight, he lost to Verdum, ending his long, amazing streak. I mean, in MMA, everybody loses, just the way the sport is. And for Fedor to have gone 10 years without a loss just is mind-boggling in this sport. So props to Verdum for that. But I think Fedor, if they fought 10 times, Fedor would probably win 8 or 9 of the 10 fights. Made a mistake and got caught by a good fighter. But we need to see him against the best there is, and in the best in Strikeforce's Alistair Overeem. So if he does not go to the UFC, then the fight we want to see is against Alistair Overeem. So it's on M1. I don't think it's on Overeem. I don't think it's on anybody else. It's squarely on the shoulders of the people at M1 to get that fight done with Scott Coker.
All right, and I think your number one fight for buzz and that you'd have some interest in seeing, the most interest in seeing, would be George St. Pierre and Anderson Silva. Will the timing be right, though, in 2011? Silva seems to have some guys lined up. You know, Sana may be back in the mix eventually. He's got Belfort. Can he get through all those guys? Could St. Pierre stumble along the way? And does George have enough time before the end of the year, Kevin, after defending his title once or twice, to get to that 200-pound level that he wants to get to before he cuts back to 85?
I think there is time for it to happen this year. You know, Anderson Silva is going to fight Vitor Belfort, as you mentioned, Steve, at UFC 126. That'll be early in February. You know, there's a fight card in August in Rio de Janeiro. What do you think? Silva St. Pierre, and the main event. Oh, that would be wild. I think that, you know, that would be a Super Bowl type fight card. So maybe you know, GSP can start working on putting the weight on now. And here would be my dream scenario: Anderson Silva beats Vitor Belfort at UFC 126. The UFC then announces that George St. Pierre is going to fight on the card in Toronto at the end of April, but not as the UFC welterweight champion, making his debut at middleweight, and have him fight a top middleweight. And if he gets past that and he feels physically he's ready, go into the fight at UFC, whatever it's going to be. We don't know the number. Fight Anderson Silva in Rio for the middleweight championship, and really for the pound-for-pound championship. That would be a case where it would be even bigger than the weight class title. It would be just a mega fight.
The last fight I want to see, my wish, is for a repeat, because I think it actually has a good chance to be fight of the year on a lot of lists. I want to see, I'll give you the scenario, I want to see Leonard Garcia, Korean Zombie, Steve Mazzagatti in the ring, and I want to see Tony Weeks, Adelaide Bird, and Cecil Peoples as the judges.
You might get your chance on that one.
I don't think that's going to happen. The fight might happen, but I don't think those officials will be there, and I know Mazzagatti, unless it's in Nevada, he ain't going to be in there.
I have a feeling that Mazzagatti is going to be not in that many fights outside of Nevada, no.
Yeah. I'm just glad Dana used that line on Mazzagatti and not the both of us, that we shouldn't be anywhere near a fight, let alone in there reffing it.
I think he's used a lot harsher lines on you, Steve, than on Steve Mazzagatti.
There you go. All right, Kev. Hey,
the guy's named Steve that Dana doesn't like.
That's what it is. I don't even have a mustache.